Welcome to the Building to Scale podcast, where we bring real entrepreneur stories that showcase the challenges and successes in building and scaling an entrepreneurial business. Our host, Jeff Chastain, is a business transformation coach with Admentis, where he coaches business leaders and their teams with a proven set of principles and tools, helping them gain clarity in and get more of what they want from their business. Make sure to stick around until the end of the show, and we will reveal how you can become our next guest.
Welcome, everybody. Jeff Chastain here with another episode of the Building to Scale podcast, where I just have the opportunity and the pleasure really to speak with different entrepreneurial business leaders here, just hearing their stories, their challenges, because we've heard common themes through the podcast of different business owners and challenges they've run into, but everybody's got their own little unique story here. So today's guest with me here is Jim Traister with Digital Navigator here. And Jim, I would say you can clarify that a lot more than I can, or put a lot more detail around that, but welcome to the show. And thank you for taking a few minutes out today to come talk with us.
Of course, Jeff. Thanks so much. I look forward to sharing.
So tell us a little bit more about what you got going on these days with Digital Navigator and everything else.
Well, if we're just about talking about today, we got a lot going on today.
Yeah.
So anybody who's an entrepreneur listening to this, it changes sometimes on a daily basis, but on a weekly basis. So essentially, I'm one of the two partners in our business. I own 50% of the Digital Navigator International Corporation, and I manage the U.S. Essentially subsidiary here in the States. I'm based in Texas, and we're a digital agency. We're full service. Our market is independent businesses around the world. The majority of our business comes from course providers. So that's people who provide education online. So if you think about a university online, they provide live courses and recorded courses, and their subscription and base is the majority of our clients. And they're around the world. We have people actually selling everything from piano lessons online, been in business since the 80s, all the ways up to spiritual courses to financial education is one of our biggest clients, doing actually over 1,000-page website. Then the next segment that we provide to, which is about 30% of our business, is the hospitality business, which is where I come from. I was in the restaurant business for 16 years. So it's like wineries and hotels and butchers and ice cream wholesalers and folks like that around the country, even a dairy up in Iowa that's been in business over 150 years. Many times they're just looking for basics, like e-commerce site or just a basic 10-page site. And then the rest is just people that we like to work with. And we call that our most fun vertical. We're at a point now that we make enough money, we can choose who we want to work with. So that's like, we have a gentleman out in Missouri who owns 6 gymnasiums. He's going to expand to 100. So we're implementing SEO for him, his website, campaigns, the whole 9 yards. And we have a local psychologist here in Dallas and financial advisory group. And it's just, we're very fortunate to be at this place. Last year, we grew by 6 times. So as I shared with you on a previous call in preparation for this podcast, focuses on building infrastructure this year. And again, continue to implement systems is really what we're focused on at this time.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. So tell us a little bit more about, from an entrepreneurial kind of standpoint, how did you go from, obviously, I think you said Brinker and 7-Eleven before, big corporate America, to now saying, let's go start an entrepreneurial kind of small business realm here. How did you make that transition, or what was kind of the genesis of that?
Yeah. So depending on the day you ask me that question, let's say by fate or by accident. But the short story is I actually left corporate world to go teach, because that was my goal when I retired. So I started that at around age 44 or so. I'm 56 now. And while I was teaching, this is about 2007, 2008, social media was just starting to bloom. In my classroom, I had a student up front. Her name was Sarah. I'll never forget. And I had 2 rules in my class. Don't be late to class. Other thing is, do not text in class. Well, Sarah was sitting up front with her cell phone like this. I said, Sarah, why are you texting? You know the rules in here. Straight A student. She says, Mr. Traister, which is my last name. I'm not texting, I'm tweeting. I was like, what's tweeting? So the whole class explained to me what tweeting is. We talked about Facebook. This is like 2008, 2009. And people really just starting to get on. Fast forward, I decided to get a Facebook account and Twitter account. And as I always share with everybody, the best advice I can give to any teacher is, when you're over 40 years old, don't try to be the cool teacher. So that didn't work out too good with the class, but I soon came across a gentleman by the name of Gary Vaynerchuk, who's very big today, back in 2009, 2010. And he really made sense out of social media for me. He comes from retail as well too. And that's why it made so much sense. I'm like, wow, there's a way to drive sales with this. So I have a friend who's local here, still owns a restaurant. I asked him if I could do his social media for free. And he said yes. And then the first month we were able to bring in Guy Fieri from the Food Network. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so easy. Back in the day on Twitter, around 2009 to 2011, you could reach out to celebrities and they would answer back to you. And it was just so easy. And then next month we had an NBA player from the Mavericks come in. And again, it was just about reaching out on Twitter. And that's what I had done my whole life in the restaurant business to drive sales. And even at the college, I was running a hotel and restaurant program, and we grew the sales by 7 times after the first 3 years. And it was all about building relationships. And I soon realized that social media was about building relationships to drive sales. And that's the way I've always driven sales. But social media was on steroids. Fast forward, I left the university world, created my own business. I fell in love with it because there's so much learning and it really fit my personality. Spent 2 or 3 years just kind of trying to understand what does it mean to be in business for yourself. I made a lot of mistakes along the way and still am today. Fast forward about 6, 7 years later, I met my business partner at a convention down in Austin, Texas. He's a real genius, a guy who comes from Ernst & Young. He understands the whole developer technical world. He literally is a genius. And I really enjoy the customer service, sales, human resources side. So I run that side of our business, and he runs all the folks with research and development and as well as the developers as well too. So fast forward, we decided to partner about a year and a half ago. We were sharing 33 customers. And then we got so busy. Like I shared last year, we built our sales by 6 times over the previous year. We couldn't even sign our own agreements until December. So we just wrapping up the legal process this past February, and just really excited about what we got going on. What we're really passionate about is helping independent businesses out there, and it's all about driving sales for them at the end of the day. And I love that, because you're making a difference, not just for the business, but anybody who's listening who's independent business, it's not just about being successful in your business. You're making a difference for your family, and you're also living your dream. So I find that really exciting versus working with the big corporations out there, for what it's worth.
Yeah, no, I'm right there in that boat with you as well. I love working with that kind of vertical slice, that kind of industry slice right there. That it's just, I've been through the growing pains myself and in previous companies of trying to get there. So it's a passion. But I'm curious. Obviously, being in the technology industry, like you said, social media, early days, yeah, you can reach out and have anybody respond versus now. What's that transition kind of been like? Obviously, from a business services standpoint, because, yeah, talking about 2007, 2009, a lot's changed in 10, 12 years, if I can sit here and do the math real quick in my head from a technology standpoint. So how have you seen that from a business perspective, or how have you adapted from a business perspective with that?
Yeah, so let me start off with saying, one of our mottos internally, and I share it with prospects all the time, and we talk about it in our orientation with our own team members, is what you do offline, you do online. So it's still about building relationships. And, so many people, just like back in 2009, 2010, Gary Vaynerchuk, one of the first things he shared on his podcast is, it's not about the technology, it's about this right here in heart. And nothing's changed. And everybody thinks it's about the technology, and changing technology is not. So we talk about nurturing relationships. We have a 9-step process, and starting off with like awareness, engagement, and then asking for the contact information. So like we talked on our first meeting, Jeff, is about first provide value. It's the same thing. We use the analogy of dating, and kind of makes it fun with a sales prospect. It's like, man, most people out there, they won't ask you to get married on the first date when they come to a website. So we're like, hey, no, give value, as much value as you can. Then it's somewhere along the lines, make it such a compelling offer that they can't refuse if it's the right target prospect. So, and then we continue nurturing relationship and providing goodwill and caring for people. For us, we feel like that's a differentiator. And going back to my days in the restaurant business, driving sales, it was always about that. If you're going to beat the competition, yeah, you might have a great product, great service, but at the end of the day, it's going to be about that relationship one-on-one, right? And remembering your kids' names, and remember this. And I can tell you 10 things that I think about several clients right now about them. So, it's the same thing our clients need to do on behalf of their own clients as well too. We try to teach them. With that said, on the technology side, we're really focused on measuring every step of the process. For us, that's a real big differentiator, from the time somebody finds one of our clients on the search engine all the way to the time they go visit their website. How long are they spending on that page? Where are they traveling on that page? And why do we want to know that? So we put the button, if they want to download a webinar or a free infographic. So we put the button in the right place. And I'll give you a good example of a local ice cream wholesaler, multi-million-dollar one here in Plano, Texas. I'll say the name after our podcast if you want. But we found that 85% of the people who were coming to his contact form were actually leaving it. And so we had to do is keep on optimizing. But if we weren't measuring that particular metric, we would have never known. So many people out there are getting great traffic. Sometimes it's not quality or sometimes it's quality. But at the end of the day, what we deliver is actually conversions. And that's what most of our prospects who've worked with other agencies, that's what they're most frustrated about is they've spent a lot of money, they're not getting conversions. And it's usually either the agency they're dealing with doesn't measure every aspect and every single step of the process of the journey that the prospect's taking with their particular client, and or they don't know how to actually look at the metrics properly.
No, and it's really key there on the measuring side, because I know I've been there myself and see plenty of people that are plenty of times before this, like specifically from a marketing perspective, you can go dump all this money into social media and the website and the webinars, like I said, all this stuff. And if you don't, all of a sudden, well, we're not seeing the return on it. We're not seeing any sales. Like, okay, which one of those systems is not working? Where is the breakdown? It's like, if you don't have the numbers, if you don't have the data there, and it goes into all aspects of business to me, it's like, okay, just because profitability is down, why is it down? Is it because you don't have the right people? Is it because you're not in the right market? Is it because your process is broken? If you're not tracking that kind of stuff in business, you're flying blind, basically.
I agree. And I'd just like to add one tip for people listening. And just to share with you folks who are listening, if you're spending money on a campaign with an agency you've hired, we always advise don't spend more than $500 on the first campaign, because that's enough money to spend to just gather data to optimize a campaign for the next promotion. And I'll give you folks an example. We have a client that's spending $14,000 a month with us on campaigns, but we started her off at $500. She wanted to spend that with us from the beginning, but the answer was no to them. We make more money when she spends more money, but that would have been the wrong thing to do. Spending $500, we can collect enough data over 4 weeks that we can continue to optimize that campaign. And then, man, if she spent $100,000 today, because we're running the fourth campaign with her, it's all predictable, because it's all based on data, back to your point. Jeff, something I didn't share earlier when you asked me questions about, hey, what's our day look like and stuff like that. And we're constantly, a major focus myself is making sure that we're developing metrics that make sense, and not so many of them that, they become wasted. I found I used to be a financial analyst, and so many times our group would create reports, but nobody would really use them. And generally, I find that if there's 2 or 3 metrics for each particular thing that we're interested in optimizing, that's enough. Except in the website world, we need to understand every step of that journey so we can optimize it. But offline, what you say, I'm such a big believer in it. And what I would add on, as I was sharing with my business partner, Paul, the other day, people do what they're rewarded for, but they also got to be measured. And I think there's an old saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is, people do what they get measured for, or they get whatever's expected, right? It needs to be measured. And I think that's really important. I'm a believer in that, for what it's worth.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I always tie it back to the sales rep or whatever, that, okay, if you're measuring him on the number of calls he makes, the number of dials he makes every day, but what you really care about is the closed deals or the new leads, he's going to sit there and focus on, I got to get 30, 40 dials in today. I could care less what it actually turns into. They're measuring me on how many times I pick up the phone and call right there. So that's, to me, that's the perfect example of it, making sure that measuring, yes, but also measuring the right things, because a lot of times we can put the wrong numbers out there, the wrong metrics, and
yes, sir,
maybe have a warm, fuzzy feeling that, hey, all of our sales team is making enough calls, but it doesn't matter. They're not getting the results, kind of a thing there. You gotta have your numbers tied into the results. So yeah, it's you gotta have both parts for it, for sure.
Yeah. And I think, I assume you agree. You always start with the end in mind, as Stephen Covey says. I think that comes from him. So it's like, what's the end result? So in our world, it's going to be conversions, which is another term in our world for sales. And I'm just laughing because we just had a monthly review with one of our clients. In the past, his previous agency drove a lot more traffic, but his sales are up as a result of us 26%. So we're not driving as much traffic, but we're driving a lot more sales. And that's what matters. And after we had the conversation along the lines of what you were just sharing, is like, yeah, that's what we hired you guys to do, is to drive sales, not drive traffic, right?
Yeah, because it doesn't matter how many clicks or how many impressions or whatever you get, if it's not actually going through and converting, it's so what at that point. So that's always the challenge, especially with social media, because I find that you can get a lot of exposure, a lot of clicks, a lot of impressions, kind of a thing, without having any results, and it's easy to burn a budget pretty fast that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Most agencies take that tact. I'll share with folks out there. And we call that the awareness stage. And so first people have to become aware of your business. The next step is engagement. And like I talk with we have a writing team of about 8 writers. That's their job, to make the writing when a prospect visits a client's page, they want to engage with it, with the information that our writers are providing our clients. And that's, providing value, interest, and only then will a prospect of our client feel compelled to provide their contact information, whether it's a phone number, email. And then we have to give them a little bit more. That's either, we call that the conversion stage. And a little bit more might be a free webinar is what we do with the Digital Navigator, or it might be a small purchase of, say, $5 or $7. Continue to build that relationship for what it's worth. Yeah. So most agencies and most folks are just focused on awareness versus the whole journey. And again, we just look at just like dating. On the first date, you make eye contact, become aware of each other. And then if you're a guy, at least in the world I live in, you provide some kind of values like, and you take interest in another person, right? And then you might get the phone number, If you don't get the phone number, you got to provide some more interest. And that might be some more goodwill. And then you get the phone number. The next step is maybe you go out and have a snack. The next time is that you're getting along, she's excited, and then you move on and might have dinner together. But you don't offer to get married and see each other's family the first day. And that's a mistake that most agencies we find make out there. And they just don't know for what it's worth too.
Well, I think really honestly with especially the smaller type business, that we're looking at such small time frame of we got to have more clients now. And you got to look at the bigger, longer term picture, both in terms of client acquisition, but even in terms of a business kind of a thing there, that it just seems like the smaller the business, the more focused on today that you are, not necessarily on the longer picture here and saying, okay, what's our longer term strategy? What's our longer term plan here, rather than just say, okay, how many leads can I go buy right now? What kind of database can I go buy right now and get it done?
Exactly. Yeah, I agree with you. And I have so much commentary, and I also want to share with folks that are listening, this isn't the only way. This is what we found to be successful. In long term for us is 8 months. And so, for example, if we're offering SEO strategy, we always share with folks out there, we do not expect you to be generating leads for 8 months. And there's some technical reasons that have to do with the search engines around that. So anybody who's listening, please be aware of anybody who says they're going to be able to drive you leads with SEO right away. It just doesn't work like that. And then on the short term, there are some things you can do. But if you're a brick and mortar store or retailer, I should say, what I always share with them is, man, the relationship starts inside your store. I'll give you an example of a retail that's local here with us, Jeff. And anybody who's listening, both Jeff and I live in DFW area. And I said to her, Teresa, that, hey, we're not going to revolutionize your business overnight, but you sure can. If you start building a relationship offline, shaking hands and smiling and talking with them about their baby, then you get their contact information. They're going to be reading the emails we generate for you all the time. That's the best tactic if you're brick and mortar from our point of view, for what it's worth. For short term can make a difference, but it starts with shaking hands. And that's a beauty that brick and mortars have. It's still, to me, it's a leverage point that they have over online today.
It definitely is, but even still with online, I think there's definitely ways to do that. But yes, I agree completely. It's a lot of it's built on relationship, that the marketing out there is awareness, but still, like you said, it's very few businesses are going to complete sell that way without ever having any kind of interaction, at least like us with professional services. There's got to be interaction to it. There's got to be a conversation. There's got to be a relationship built there it's the ones it always gets me, the people that contact me on LinkedIn. Hey, I'm going to get you 20 new coaching clients kind of a thing tomorrow. It's like, no, you're not. All you're going to do is take a bunch of money here and then maybe give me a couple LinkedIn connections here. It's like this business just doesn't work that way. So I would expect yours is probably the same thing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and we want to qualify all of our prospects as well to make sure they're a good fit for us. It's really important as well. So we don't.
So you mentioned this year looking at systems and a strategy. That's obviously one of those things that I typically work with, but that's obviously looking at from a business perspective that, okay, again, looking beyond today, looking longer term, you've got to have some of this process, some of the systems. What does that kind of mean in your world? What's the impetus for it, and what's your direction or the need you're looking at to solve there with it?
Yeah. So the result that I intend to have, I was talking to my business partner again, his name is Paul. what I would do is systemize everything that's not value added. And the majority of that's going to be stuff that's not involving us. We make the most money. We also enjoy ourselves. I'm talking about myself and my business partner when we're having conversations like this with our clients, doing consults and thinking of new ways for them to make money. And like the gymnasium owner who owns 6 gymnasiums in Missouri going to 100. I typically have an hour to 2 hour call with him a month. We're not charging him. I enjoy doing that. But in order for me to do that, many things got to be happening from a system standpoint in the background, right? On automatic. And I'll give you an example. Today, I'll be doing first round interviews for SEO specialists because we're growing so fast in that particular department. Well, a lot of that could have been put on automatic, but we don't have that system in place, right? It's like I had to talk with my business partner to make sure that the job posting looks correct and on. And then who's going to answer back? And now it's flooding my email, just those kind of things. And it's like, that might just seem like minutes, but those minutes take away from the day, take away from me visiting with another client, take away from me adding additional value, right? So that's just one example for what it's worth, but it's really, we got to start somewhere. Something I learned many years ago. I used to run a bakery plant, and somebody made me aware it was actually our quality assurance person's Six Sigma methodology, which is the whole methodology around methodology around implementing systems. With that said, I was like so frantic, I didn't know where to start. And best advice that he gave me is he says, start where you think it's going to make the biggest difference. And so we had probably about 30, 40 different production lines. And so I started with the biggest volume, and it's like, yeah, that made sense. And we just move on to the next. So with us, it's going to start actually with the hiring process. We spend a lot of time with that. I've always felt like that's the most important area, that it's going to make the biggest difference for us, but we've got to systemize that. I should say I have to, because it's my responsibility. I was getting ready to point the finger at somebody else, but it's actually my responsibility.
Yeah, that's one of the challenges, obviously, of small business, is that you are wearing a lot of hats. And it's,
yeah.
One of the other interviews I was doing the other day actually made the comments like, it's not just 3 or 4 hats, it's 60 or 70 kind of hats right here. And it's the other interesting part, because you're talking about processes and systems, is that a lot of times, you mentioned just the minutes per day or whatever. A lot of times, especially as business owners, we don't realize where we're spending all of our time. And then all of a sudden you get to the end of the day and it's gone, kind of a thing there. That one of the tools I actually work with people on is, okay, sit down and catalog your entire day for a week, kind of a thing here. Spent 5 minutes on email, spent this. And what you'll see is, one, a lot of broken up time, that, okay, I was here and then I was here and I was here, kind of thing. You're not organized and focused. And then 2, like you said, you're spending a lot of your time on effectively administrative, other stuff, work that's not revenue producing or not the most profitable areas. And you'll look at that and say, wait a minute, I could, if nothing else, find a virtual assistant or something like that, hire more, whatever the case may be, but start really quantifying the data, because it's that clarity that most people don't have. It's like, I feel like I'm running all the time and I'm not getting anything done. You don't really have clarity into what you're actually doing in your day-to-day basis right there. And I see that with a lot of business owners. So
I would like to suggest, and this is just what pops up for me, because actually I'm coaching our other managers in our team. They just to give some context, they don't have my background of managing people. And what I've learned is actually comes back to setting priorities, because I feel like I'm always going to face this, as we're growing. It's like this issue with hiring. It's actually, first of all, it's a good problem. It's a problem we didn't have a year ago because we weren't growing, right? So now I realize, now I got to make, is that a priority? Or is like, should I make the sales process or our consultation process the focus of systemizing next? Well, the answer is the hiring process, because we're going to be hiring like crazy this year, because that'll make the biggest difference. I really like something I heard from somebody before, and I'm not sure your feelings on this, how you guys approach it. It's like, what's the biggest domino we can knock over that will make a difference for all the other dominoes? And so that's why I prioritize hiring. We must have 50 other things I wish we could systemize. But as you know, even though we have 34 or 35 people today, and that's more than twice as much as last year, and I've taken so much off my plate, there's always a trade-off with financing and developing people and priorities. But I think for me, I'd love to hear your feedback. It always comes back to myself asking, hey, what's that biggest domino that's going to make the biggest difference? And I've chosen hiring at this time, at least the next 3 weeks, to start systemizing. I'm not sure what's your thoughts on how you approach it.
No, it makes sense, because you want to get the biggest bang for your buck right there. But at the same time, I would also caution people or dig into that a little bit further to say, okay, at the same time, I don't want to devote all of my energy into one big priority kind of a thing there. Whereas at the same time, if I could pick a a medium level, you want to, it's I'm trying to think how you do it best describe it, like a diet or whatever. I want to go see 1 pound lost or 2 pounds lost. I'm not trying to get 100 pounds off tomorrow kind of a thing. Yeah. I want to see some of those incremental grains, because if nothing else, just from the human nature, that gets us excited, gets us working on it kind of a thing there. So whether that directly applies, but it's always one that in some ways we do it both ways. That I'll coach a company to say, okay, we need a pinnacle goal. We need the top of your mountain that you're trying to reach here in the next 10, 15 years. But we're not going to put our sights solely on that. We've got to start backing that down and say, okay, what can we do in the next 90 days to get one step closer there? So while the hiring process may be the big goal, I would break that down and say, okay, what piece of that needs to be done better? Do we need to be doing better on job descriptions and posting? Do we need to be better on identifying what's the right market, et cetera, to better identify those people that match with our culture? So looking at, while that may be the bigger picture goal, breaking it down to, okay, make sure we can do this in manageable chunks, because most people, you put some big project, something like that in front of them, it's like instant paralysis. Like, okay, I don't even know where to start. You got to start backing that down and breaking that down. So yeah, definitely from a big picture, if that's where the biggest backlog is or the biggest bulk is, then yeah, no question, no issue there. It's always, hey, where can we get the biggest bang for it? But at the same time, doing that in bite-sized chunks where hopefully we can start seeing some value here, some return on it sooner rather than waiting until the whole thing's done kind of a thing. So it's yes and no, if I one of those answers.
Yeah, I think there's some context around, right?
Yeah,
I agree with you 100% for sure. What I like about what you said about bite size, I feel like sometimes people also don't recognize is that the necessity to break it down to bite size, because when you're coaching and developing people, many times we take it for granted of how easy something is to us, and we really got to break it down, especially when you're building systems, is what I found in the past. We create a lot of systems in this bakery plant I referenced earlier, and really the more you can break it down, the better it is. And I hate to use this motto, but it's true. We always try to say, back then, we want to break it down. My kid was in 2nd grade back then, is we want to break it down so he can understand it. And if we're doing that, then everybody can understand it, and it becomes a automatic feeder system is what we used to call it. It's the same thing with us, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, no, it definitely does. And my only thing there is I would say that, again, there's a balance in there, because you can go too far with it, that you're turning it into robots, basically, that, okay, we can get anybody plug in and do it, which in some respects you do want, but at the other side, you want, hopefully you're hiring the top level, A-level talent kind of a thing there that you can afford. And I'd rather them come in here and bring in, honestly, their expertise that maybe I don't have and can improve upon that process. So there's got to be some creativity to it. To me, it goes back to the sales kind of thing of, yes, we want new leads generated. If that's better for you to make 20 calls today and get those leads, or if that's better for you to go have coffee with 10 people and get those leads, I don't really care what your method from going to point A to point B is, as long as we get A and B in there, give you the creativity to go between those two. So I always look at that from a process standpoint of, we don't need to go document every single wrench turn, every single whatever that goes into it kind of a thing. We need to hit the high level points of it to say, okay, give us the key value, the key return here, and give you your flexibility in there to some degree match your personality, but to some degree add your own flair to the process to say, okay, is there a better way? Is there a different way to do this? Because honestly, as business owners, we may like to think we do, but we don't know everything out there. So,
that's for sure, right? Yeah, guaranteed.
Yeah, the faster you learn that, the more successful you're going to be.
I agree with you. Yeah, that makes the best managers once they become humble and ask that question.
Yeah, no, it really does.
I agree with you. Yeah.
So I'm sitting here glancing at the clock. We're already running long on this one. I love having conversations, just getting to talk, but always like kind of coming back with standard kind of question, just to say, hey, looking back over, I think you've been 7-8 years something now with, or actually Digital Navigator was about 1.5 years, but it was 8 or 10 years with the other company. What's kind of from an entrepreneurial standpoint, business leader standpoint, if you were to look back and say, hey, if I was to try this again 10 years later, I might try this differently or do this differently from a lessons learned standpoint?
Gotcha. So a couple of things pop up in my mind is just do it. I didn't get started till age 45 or 46. And it's like, man, it is the most enjoyable journey. The other thing is trust yourself. I think, I wouldn't say think. Something I had to learn is I was looking outside myself for justification sometimes, because I was new as a business owner. I come from the corporate world. And man, most of the time, at least I find, is I really just trust my intuition. Most people don't have the answers, and I have 100 examples of that. And the last thing, what I see people doing, big mistake, is like I have a contact, and she wanted to kind of ask the same kind of question you just asked, Jeff. And she says, well, if I do it for 6 months, and then we'll see how it goes. I said, no, it's not 6 months. I would be thinking 5 years, if not 10 years. And I found out there, and I assume this is true for many people, 10 years is kind of like the magic mark, is what I've heard, where people really start hitting their stride. And I found that to be true. Maybe that became a self belief that became justified for myself to take it slower. But that's what we found. We're literally going on our 11th years, and we're just starting to burst at our seams, thankfully. So yeah, it's really that. And but I would like to leave some piece of advice I've given with a lot of people, if you don't mind, Jeff. So many people out there feel uncertain about getting started, or uncertain, hey, about this, or I made this mistake. What I share with so many people today, and just need to be reminded, is, man, all the resources are right at your hands. I'll give you an example, like Gary Vaynerchuk in 2009, 2010. I was literally tweeting him on Twitter, asking him questions. And then I went down to South by Southwest, and I volunteered to spend 6 hours with him while he ran a booth down there. It's like everything's on Google today. Jeff's company's offering some, I saw that free book, that download. There's just so much free resources out there. Somebody has the answer for you. You don't even have to pay for it today. It's beautiful, which is different than 20 years ago, for what it's worth. So you can do it. And I just say, everybody say, thank you very much for listening. I wish everybody the very best and best of luck. And thank you, Jeff, as well, too, for the opportunity to speak with you.
Oh, no, appreciate it. And always appreciate the advice, and just, like I said, the stories. So if people are looking to get more information about you or about Digital Navigator, what's the best resources these days to go find some more information there?
I appreciate it. Well, they can always connect with me on on LinkedIn at Jim Traister. But if again, to drive some value and provide goodwill, we have some significant amount of articles and webinars on our website, which is digitalnavigator.com. There's a resource page there. You literally can just take it and run if you want. Otherwise, you can reach out to me from the digitalnavigator.com. Just reach out and say you want to talk to Jim. You heard me through Jeff's podcast here, and be more than willing to help out. Just tell me you don't want to be charged, and we'll spend 15 minutes. I'll just give you advice. It's my pleasure. That's just the way we operate.
No, I love it. Always giving back, always giving value there, right there with it. So I love that idea. And yeah, well, all the links will be right here below. So easy to click on and find you there. But appreciate the time, appreciate the advice and the input there. And hopefully we'll be hearing good things here moving forward with the company.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it again.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Building to Scale podcast. If you would like to share your entrepreneurial business growth story, please visit buildingtoscale.com/guest. If you got something out of this interview, would you do both us and our guest a favor and share it on your social media accounts? Don't forget to hit subscribe in your player so that you don't miss any future episodes, and make sure to reach out to Jeff Chastain on any of the major social media networks, or check us out at admentis.com.